Hello everyone, Donnie Wanders here, and today I have wandered to the Shubenacadie waterway. Throughout this series of videos, I'll be joined by my friend, marine historian and Shubenacadie Canal volunteer, Richard McMichael.
The canal itself is probably the most ambitious project ever undertaken in Nova Scotia during the industrial age.
We'll explore its history and how today it has transformed into one of the best recreational corridors in all of Canada. Welcome to the Shubenacadie Canal. So far, Richard and I have explored locks 1, 2, and 3, and the 2 marine railways that were built for the Shubenacadie Canal. Well, today we're going to be looking at locks 4, 5, and 6. So let's start here at lock 4.
Well, welcome to Fall River, Don, and to Lock 4, which is where the waters from Lake Thomas flow into Fletcher Lake, which is behind us. And Lock 4 is one of only 2 locks that actually has a proper name. It's also known as Fletcher's Lock, and it's named after Mr. Robert Fletcher, who the lake is also named after, who was a very popular innkeeper around these parts back in the day.
Oh.
And his inn was located on the eastern shore of the lake. And a lot of people that were coming through the canal to do business would stay at Fletcher's Lake. And it's actually, Fletcher's Lake is one of the only lakes in this part of the province where the name is actually on the original survey maps from the early 1800s. Some of the lakes were named afterwards. Fletcher's Lake has been in existence since around the 1820s.
Okay.
And this is one of the smallest locks on the canal. And it was designed to take the tugboat and the barge roughly about 3 meters from the Lake Thomas level down to Fletcher's Lake.
So that is pretty small compared to some of the other locks.
Yeah, Lock
right?
3 and Lock 5 in particular, the 2 largest locks on
Yeah.
the canal system.
Okay.
There's docking facilities at either end of the lock, so people that are paddling, say from this direction from Lake Thomas, there's a dock that can get up. There's a little right-of-way that runs along this side of the lock, and there's some stone steps just behind us here that go back down so they can get back into the water and start paddling on Fletcher Lake. And then from Fletcher Lake, at the head of Fletcher Lake, they'll find Lock 5, which leads from Fletcher's Lake into Shubenacadie Grand Lake itself.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit about what is on, so over to our left we have the lock.
Yeah.
And then over to the right, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, over to the right is where the course of the canal runs today. Essentially, this is the channel that runs from Lake Thomas into Fletcher Lake. The water's been diverted over to this side of the lock because one of the walls of the lock, the western wall, is being supported right now by diagonal support beams because it's in need of restoration work. And so to facilitate any restoration work that would take place down the road, the water has been diverted, and that was done basically even after the canal went out of business in 1871.
Yeah.
So this isn't something new. The water's been diverted along here for many years now.
Like a century, over a century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's still some really nice, delightful sort of architectural and infrastructural features here, including the beautiful little iron
oh yeah, where
beams.
we're sitting.
Yeah, that were sort of put in to sort of connect the 2 huge granite blocks together.
Yeah.
And they contract and expand, of course, as the temperature rises and lowers and freezes and thaws.
One of the really great things about this location is that we can actually get inside the lock.
Exactly, yeah, because the
So-
water's been diverted around it.
Should we go do that?
Let's have a look inside a lock.
Okay.
So Lock 4, Fletcher's Lock, gives us the first opportunity we've actually had to get physically inside one of the locks to see how they were constructed, because of course the water's been diverted to the other side of the lock because this wall, as you can see, needs quite a bit of restoration and repair work to it, with the buttresses there shoring up that entire part of the wall. But from here you can see just how beautifully cut the granite blocks were that were made to build the walls of the locks. And this lock, like Lock 1, was begun in the first phase of construction of the canal back in 1826. And it had no real work done to it in the second phase of construction beginning in 1854. So this is the way it always looked. And it was the smallest of the locks along with Lock 1 because it really only was required to raise and lower the tugboat and the barge about 3 meters from Lake Thomas out here to Fletcher Lake. And in the meantime of any restoration work being done, as I say, these beautiful buttresses are supporting this western wall of the loch. But down here at water level, you can again get a sense of the, I guess, modest nature of this loch compared to something that was huge like Loch 3 or Loch 5. This loch required to only raise or lower about 3 meters of water level. It's one of the more intimate lochs, but as I say, because of the work that's being required to work on the loch, it does give you this wonderful opportunity to really come here to Loch 4 Park, walk through the loch, and sort of see where the tugboat and the barge would have passed from Lake Thomas out into Fletcher Lake here. It may look really serene, but in a sense it's along this stretch that the Shubenacadie Canal was forced out of business in 1871. We're looking along towards Lake Thomas. And for many years at Lake Thomas, where the Wilson's gas station is now, there was a sort of a tower bridge, London Bridge style structure went across the road that could be raised up to allow the tugboats and the barges to pass through. During their war with the railways, when the railways gained the ascendancy in their battle against the canal, it was there at Fall River where the railways built a permanent bridge across the canal that made it impossible for the canal's tugboats to get under because of the height of their smokestacks. And it's really the construction of that bridge that was the final nail in the coffin for the Shubenacadie Canal, because it meant that was the end of the line. Tugboats and barges could only get from Halifax to Fall River because of the bridge. They couldn't get any farther. In the same way, vessels coming from Maitland and down the Shubenacadie River could only get as far as Fall River because of the construction of that bridge. So because of that bridge here at Fall River, the Shubenacadie Canal essentially ceases to be in operation after 1871, only a decade after it begins service.
Now that we've had a good in-depth in-loch look at Loch 4, let's head down the road just a few kilometers to Loch 5.
So we are now in the beautiful little community of Wellington, Nova Scotia, and we are standing on the top of Loch 5. And along with Loch 3, this was the largest loch ever built along the Shubenacadie Canal. And thanks to some wonderful community partnerships and the Shubenacadie Canal Commission, of the 4 lochs that have been partially or completely restored, this is the only one that is still fully functional because of the paddle arms on the loch doors here. When the loch was restored, it was decided not to divert the water through the loch. So the loch is restored, but it's not functional, obviously, because the water doesn't go all the way through. And Loch 5 was built to allow the tugboat and the barge to pass from Lake Thomas into Shubenacadie Grand Lake, spreading out before us with the marshes, and it opens up into one of Nova Scotia's largest lakes, hence the name Grand Lake. And Loch 5 is a wonderful piece of construction, and it was built, as you can see, from the large granite blocks and that were used in the first phase of construction of the canal, 1826 to 1831. This loch didn't suffer the same type of weathering issues as the lochs in Dartmouth, Loch 2 and Loch 3 suffered from, so it did not have too much restoration or reworking done in the second phase of construction on the canal between 1854 and 1861. And today it's part of a public park. We're near Laurie Provincial Park on Grand Lake, and today you will find here a launch so that if you've got your own canoe and kayak, you can pull into the park, access Grand Lake. But there's also a proper boat launch here, so if you've got a motorboat or some kind of putt like that, you can head out into the lake and go cruising around on your own. So it's a beautiful little spot, and this is one of the real hidden treasures in Nova Scotia, because you have access to, as I say, one of the largest lakes in the province, but also have access to a beautiful and now fully restored piece of Nova Scotia's industrial heritage. The work that was done in restoring this was just really nice. And again, even though we can't get down on the lower level, compare the scale of this lock with Lock 4. And you get a sense that you're going from Lake Thomas at a sort of a higher elevation down to Grand Lake. And then from Grand Lake, the last of the proper locks of this sort of style is Lock 6 at Horn Settlement. And from that, after that, once you're actually on the Shubenacadie River, you've just got the Lock 7, 8, and 9, which are earthen banks reinforced with stonework to divert water to make sure that the channel is, or the river is deep enough to allow for the tugboat and the barge to pass easily on through. Also, when you step inside the locks like this, Lock 4, Lock 5, you get a sense of how wide both the tugboat and the barge were to be able to fit through here. And you can also see where the doors were, and each of the doors had sluice gates so that when the water would be allowed back down into Grand Lake, it could be done so in a gradual method rather than just simply opening the doors, allowing all the water in this lock to flush back out into Grand Lake as a mini tsunami, because of course Grand Lake level lower than the Lake Thomas level above us.
The construction of Lock 5 reminds me a little bit of a fortress. Let's head to a completely different style of lock, Lock 6.
Okay, well, we are standing right now on the banks of the Shubenacadie River. If we've been on the tugboat and the barge taking supplies from Halifax along the canal, we've passed through Lock 5 at Wellington, we've traversed the gigantic Shubenacadie Grand Lake, and we've entered into the slow meandering waters of the Shubenacadie River, and we've arrived at Horns Lock in Horn Settlement, or Lock 6 as it's known today. And this was created to provide a deep, wide navigable channel because the river on the other side of the lock was frequently not deep enough to provide access way for a side paddle wheeler and a barge. And so the lock was built, again, traditional styles, but as you'll notice, unlike the other locks that we've seen so far, no doors. There's no elevation change here. This lock was created simply to provide a deep, wide channel for the tugboat and the barge to go through as they progress their way up the Shubenacadie River towards Lock 7, 8, and 9, and ultimately to Maitland, the large shipbuilding community at the head of the Shubenacadie River where it flows into the Bay of Fundy. And here today, again, you can see the traditional style that was construction that's here, the stonework, a little bit of granite, but mostly just local stone that was quarried and brought to the site here at Horn Settlement. There is a plan to do some major restoration work at Lock 6, but with the damage that was done recently to the boardwalk leading out here, that's become the main priority. And so, as I say, there's a plan in place to do some restoration work at Lock 6. No timeline for when that work's going to take place. But again, as part of the canal, 114-kilometer long access way straight through the heart of Nova Scotia, it's a wonderful place to come and think about the ingenuity of the people during industrial era Nova Scotia that made this canal possible. So we are actually standing, for want of a better word, inside Lock 6. And as you can see today, Lock 6 is a bit of a fixer-upper, but it has all of the hallmarks of a traditional North American style lock. So you've got, instead of the huge granite blocks, you've got these smaller, more compact pieces of stonework held together and reinforced with the timbers that ran vertically up the sides of the lock. And in fact, you can see right here is one of the bolts that the timber would actually be bolted onto. So the timber would sit into that bolt and it would actually be bolted right into the face of the lock for additional support. And you can see down around the water line, you can see where the timbers are still visible and still in existence. They haven't fallen away or been eaten away. But again, very nice to see little features like this still sticking out of the face of the lock. And so some work to be done here, obviously. There's a tree that's come in for a visit, but still, the fact that this is still here in any way, shape, or form is really wonderful because this is Nova Scotian industrial heritage at its very best. It's built at a time when Nova Scotia was an industrial superpower, when we've got steam-powered ferries in Halifax Harbour, when an amateur doctor from Nova Scotia, Abraham Gessner, becomes the first person to distill kerosene from shale and bitumen and anthracite. And Lock 6, as part of the whole canal system, is just such a treasure. And it's so nice that it's here. Drive up to Horn Settlement sometime, have a quick little walk. There's a loop trail that you can go on, even when the boardwalk isn't open, to explore Lock 6 and the trail around here. This is the far end of the channel leading from Lock 6, running parallel to the rapids on the Shubenacadie River, and behind us is the opening up into the Shubenacadie River itself. Water level today looks pretty low, but thankfully the tugboat and the barge were both built with relatively flat bottoms to alleviate the potential for them running aground in the river. Obviously as well, there would have been some dredging had gone on beforehand, but over here to the left, this is the river, the impassable section of the river with its rapids that the Lock 6 and the channel diverted around. It ran essentially parallel to this to keep any problems out of the way. You can see there looks like maybe perhaps a bridge that went across here at one point. I'm going to guess, because there's some timber that runs all the way across with what looks like it might have been a footpath at some point across here. This does look like it's man-made. The timbers definitely are man-made.
Pretty gentle rapids here. But,
yeah, at this time of year, but also look
right
how
now,
low the water level is too, considering that the channel would have come out essentially around here, and this is not particularly deep as it is right now. But yeah, this is the Shubenacadie River. And so, yeah. And then after this, there are no proper industrial locks to speak of. There are 3 more locks, 7, 8, and 9. They're not industrial at all. They're just man-worked natural features that were designed to make sure that the water was deep enough in the channels for the tugboat and the barge. But yeah, here we are on the Shubenacadie River. Basically almost at its head, because Grand Lake is just a little bit behind us there, and this will continue to flow and flow and flow and widen out into the wonderful muddy brown waters of the Shubenacadie River as it flows into the Bay of Fundy near Maitland, with its tidal bore and whitewater rafting opportunities. And at Maitland and all those communities along the along the Bay of Fundy rather, those wonderful, wonderful shipyards that built the tall ships that sailed the world and made Nova Scotia a household name around the world's oceans.
Here in Horn Settlement is where the Shubenacadie waterway turns from man-made engineered canal into natural river. And because I've made it to the river, I'm going to wrap up this series here. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this series on the Shubenacadie Canal. And of course, I could not have made it without my co-star, Richard McMichael, who took so much time to give to us, to teach us all about the canal. I think it was so great to have someone put what we were looking at into a cultural and historical context, so that you can understand a little bit more what you're looking at. So thank you so much, Richard, for all the time that you gave, time and effort in this little mini series. Now, just because I'm wrapping up the series here doesn't mean that there won't be any more videos about the Shubenacadie waterway. There just won't be any more kind of coming up immediately. So there's an entire river for me to explore. And there are lots of little side trails and parks and things like that all along the waterway. So make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of those. But I'm gonna wrap it up here. So thank you for watching, and Donnie Wanders. We'll see you in the next one.